Howdy, folks. How's everybody doing? Hope everybody got some food. Show of hands, who's had lunch already? Who hasn't had lunch? Okay, good. So not a super hangry crowd. That's a good start. Anyway, here to talk about building fast, scalable, and reliable applications with Firebase and Cloud Run. I'm Justin Mahood. I'm a product manager in Google Cloud, and I work on Cloud Run and other serverless products. And I'm here with Dmitry.
Hey folks, my name is Dmitry Lyalin. I'm a group product manager in Firebase. We're a big team, and I work specifically on some of our serverless technologies. So that's what we're going to be talking about today.
Awesome. We're going to talk about how to use two key pieces of Google's development ecosystem that go together like peanut butter and chocolate, and that's GCP and Firebase, and particularly Cloud Run on the GCP side. First, I'll give you guys a quick overview of Cloud Run and what it is. Then I got a demo of using Cloud Run and our integrations feature to take advantage of some of Firebase's features. We'll talk a little bit about what's new in Cloud Run, and then I'm going to hand things over to Dmitry, who is going to go onto a little bit of a deep dive of the Firebase ecosystem, and then he's got a demo that's going to tie everything together. So first, we'll start with Cloud Run. Okay, show of hands, who here has used Cloud Run in the past? Yeah, a lot of folks. Okay. Well, some of this is going to be review, but Cloud Run lets you deploy and scale applications quick and securely in a fully managed environment. It's simple and automated. You give us a container, and we handle the rest, including scaling up and down and scaling to zero. There's no infrastructure to manage. You don't have to create a compute cluster. You don't have to configure networking, set up TLS certificates. And it allows you to go faster. A developer can go from code to a Cloud Run microservice in seconds. And we do that using two different kinds of resources, sort of two primitives within Cloud Run. On the one hand, we have services. Services are request-driven and auto-scaled. So think HTTP microservice. But it's not just HTTP. We support event-driven services, as well as WebSockets gRPC. It's got built-in traffic splitting so that you can do gradual rollouts between new revisions or do blue-green deployments out of the box. You also get a publicly accessible URL and a TLS certificate as soon as you deploy, and that's behind our load balancer. The Cloud Run service is, as I mentioned, it auto-scales up and down and is truly serverless. It scales down to zero when you're not getting any requests. But you're only paying for the CPU and memory that you're consuming while your code is running and while it's servicing requests. On the other side of the spectrum, we have Cloud Run jobs. Cloud Run jobs are containers that run to completion. There's no HTTP server in these containers. So these can be manually triggered and can run a number of tasks in parallel. Tasks are what we call instances of Cloud Run jobs. And again, those can be manually triggered, or they can be triggered off of a schedule. But like services, you're only paying, you're only billed for the compute and memory time that your job is executing. Because Cloud Run is pay per use. We automatically scale services up and down. Whenever there's an HTTP request coming into the URL of your service, once that's routed to your container instance, the clock starts. When your instance is done servicing those requests, servicing that request, the clock stops, and assuming there's no more requests in the queue, then the billing stops at about 100 millisecond granularity. There's a generous free tier, and we do offer committed use discounts. But I do want to spend some time talking about how Cloud Run enables developers to go faster. And this is where some of the Firebase pieces are going to tie in. So first off, as probably everybody here knows, Cloud Run is built around containers. But what that means is that no matter what programming language or framework your app is written in, you can deploy it to Cloud Run. The first example there, you can see you can specify a pre-built container that you've built elsewhere and give it to us, or you can just provide a source code, and using tight integration with Cloud Build, we'll build that to a container for you. If there's a Docker file, we use the Docker file. If there's no Docker file, we'll we use GCP's build packs out of the box to detect the language and try and build that into a container that Cloud Run knows how to run. Taking that a step further, we also have built-in support for continuous delivery. You can, right from our console UI, configure a connection to your Git repository for your Cloud Run service. And every time you push on that branch, a new build gets kicked off and it's deployed and live within seconds. As I mentioned before, you get a public URL out of the box. Of course, you have control over whether that's truly public and requires no authentication or only allows authenticated requests. But finally, no application is just a single container, or very few applications are just a single container. Typically, you've got dependencies in the form of other services. Sometimes those are databases. Sometimes those are other networking technologies. And so lately, we've gone a step further and offered one-click integrations with other Google services so that you can build out your application to take advantage of all of these dependencies. I've got a few of them on the screen there, but I want to, because this is a talk about using Cloud Run and Firebase, I want to double-click a little bit onto Firebase hosting. Cloud Run Integrations is in preview, and we launched the Firebase hosting integration a couple of months ago into preview as well. And it gives you one-click access to a vanity.web.app subdomain, as well as free custom domains, and access to a global CDN that requires effectively no additional configuration. And I've got a little demo of that I'll show you guys here shortly. But this integration also gets you a Firebase project as the gateway to the rest of the Firebase ecosystem. So Firebase authentication, extensions, and a number of the things that Dmitry here is going to talk about in a few minutes. So that's enough talking. I'd love to get to a demo of showing a real-world application deployed to Cloud Run and how we can take advantage of the features of Firebase and Firebase hosting. And my computer went to sleep. Let's make sure that we are still, okay. We are back alive. Okay, so, I recently wrote a little application for my personal blog. I wrote it in Go. It's my favorite programming language. As you can see, it's a really simple blogging engine, and it's all all of the pages and all of the pages and posts are rendered with server-side templates. So it fits really nicely in Cloud Run. It's a single container. For storage, I'm actually using Cloud Firestore, which is our fully managed document database, which is nice and easy to leverage from Cloud Run using Cloud Run's built-in workload identity. So it was as easy as adding an SDK. I'm going to go ahead and deploy this live. So I'll do gcloud run services, gcloud run deploy, next demo blog. And that's actually going to upload my source code. And it's off building that container. And that's not very fun to watch, so I'm going to fast forward in time a little bit using the magic of demo technology and jump over here to where I've got my blog container already deployed. And like I mentioned before, after that one command, gcloud run deploy, once it's deployed, I have a live public URL. Now, I've configured the security on this so that it is publicly accessible. That's always a choice whenever you're deploying a new service for the first time, whether you want to make it truly public or not. But I can go ahead and click on that, and you can see it's my blog with just a couple of posts. I'm just getting started with this whole blogging thing. But I did talk about my recent trip to the Salmon Ladder in Seattle, where I live with my kids. But I'm looking, and the default URL is great to get up and running quickly. But if I want to start sharing my blog on social media or trying to get noticed on various news sites, I'd like something that's a little more user-friendly than the automatically generated with some hashes URL that comes with Cloud Run. And that's where Cloud Run integrations can come into play and Firebase hosting. Whoops. Jump to it. So I'm going to go back here on my next demo blog service. And to get that prettier domain and start to set up a custom domain, I'm going to go on the Integrations tab and add a Firebase hosting integration. And let's see, I'll pick my .web.app URL. I'm going to do Justin's live blog .web.app. And you can see no other configuration. all I've got to do is click submit. And this is off to the races. Now, if I needed to enable those APIs, accept terms of service, which I have already done in this project, but there would have been a dialog at that stage. So I guess it's technically 2 clicks, but now this is off and deploying. And again, I'm going to use a little bit of demo magic to jump ahead on another service that I've already pre-configured. But you can see that the Firebase hosting site is live, and that I've got justinsblog.web.app as a live URL right over there. And if I want to jump further to the Firebase console and further configure this integration, I can do that with this link. So I'm going to do that and jump over here. Again, now I'm in the Firebase console, and this is loading directly from my, oh boy, no internet. That's a fun one. Here we go. And we're back. And this is pointing from that web.app URL in Firebase hosting and redirecting to my Cloud Run service that's running in GCP with just a couple of clicks. And so that's a much nicer looking URL. I feel comfortable sharing that with my family. If I want to go and add a custom domain, I can do that right from here. Again, it's a free custom domain. I'm not going to make you sit through configuring DNS. It doesn't make for a super compelling demo, but so I'll keep moving along. But let's say that my blog has suddenly gone viral. You know, my 6-year-old son's hot take on salmon migration patterns has really picked up a lot of interest in the Twitter sphere, and suddenly my service is getting hit with a couple hundred to 1,000 QPS. Now, this was not a really complex application that I built to handle huge traffic spikes. I didn't really think about it. I built it pretty quickly and deployed it in one command. So let's go see how Cloud Run is actually helping me service this traffic without me having to do anything. So you can see here a few minutes ago, the blog post started taking off. Now, it's pushing. It's not quite as much as I thought. About 400 QPS. It's servicing it appropriately. They're all 200s. You saw we were loading pages from the blog, and really nothing super noticeable there. You will notice here's Cloud Run's container instances scaling up, right? So we start with 0, and then the traffic starts rising, and it's trying to figure out where the equilibrium is, where the application can service the appropriate amount of concurrent requests, and that's awesome. I do have some rising tail latency, but that's a little bit to be expected. But it's awesome that Cloud Run helped me cope with that without me having to do anything. It truly took care of the infrastructure. But this is a blog, and I did hook up to Firebase hosting, which has this global CDN. And it's not like it's incredibly dynamic content. It doesn't change that often. So without any infrastructure configuration, with a simple code update, I can take advantage of that CDN to dramatically reduce my infrastructure usage and the load on my server here. And I'll show you how to do that. I'm going to jump back to my code. So the only thing that I need to do to take advantage of this CDN is, in the code that handles requests, is go ahead and set a cache control header in my HTTP responses for all of the post and index, responses from my blog. This is just telling browsers and any server or CDN that's caching along the way that, hey, it's okay to serve a cached copy of this content for some TTL. In this case, I chose a ridiculously small TTL of 10 seconds. Again, I'm not updating my blog that frequently, but it gives you an illustration of even a very light amount of caching with very little configuration can help you with your infrastructure. I'm going to go ahead and gcloud run deploy, and I'll do next demo blog cache. And again, I'm going to let that go off to the races. As I mentioned before, I've demo magic. I've already got a version of that deployed, and so I'm going to jump over there. So I've been pushing the same load, sort of the same 400, 500 QPS simultaneous load to both of these services since before the session started. One of them is going directly against the original Cloud Run URL. The other one is hitting the Firebase hosting endpoint that's routed through the CDN with the appropriate cache headers. And you can see that the actual QPS that's making it to my container, even with 10 seconds of caching at the CDN, is 0.1, 0.2 QPS. And I'm only serving a single instance. And you can see that my tail latencies, the latencies of my pages and responses going back to my users and to the CDN are much, much lower. And that also means that my costs are lower. So I've got a better experience for my users. And with an application that I built quickly and deployed in seconds, I can handle traffic spikes that might come from getting mentioned on a hugely popular news site. Now we'll jump back to slides. So just to quickly sum up what I just showed you. One, we went from source code in Go to a live service with a public URL in seconds. I guess maybe a minute if we waited for the container to build, depending on how much is cached, but we'll call it seconds. You saw rapid scaling of Cloud Run in response to huge spikes in incoming traffic. I didn't do anything to prepare for that. I made no configuration changes upfront to my application. It just worked. And then you saw one-click integration that gave me a global CDN and custom domain from Firebase hosting. And with just setting a standard HTTP header, I was able to dramatically reduce the load on my Cloud Run service. So I'll quickly jump to what's new with Cloud Run. The kind of the demo portion's over. But I want to give you guys an overview of some of the features that have launched either to GA or preview so far this year. So we've launched a bunch of stuff across a few pillars: developer experience, expanded workload support, security, and networking. I'll dive into each of these. I'll just give a couple of highlights on each one because there's a lot. You can feel free to look at the slide later because it's a bit of an eye chart. But we've shipped a lot of developer experience features to GA and preview over the last year. Notably, there's GA support for Cloud Deploy, Google's continuous delivery service. Now supports Cloud Run in GA. We launched the integrations feature to preview that I showed you, including some new integrations, notably the Firebase hosting integration, as well as a much asked for feature, which is the ability to load images directly from public Docker Hub repositories. So no more having to first cache it in Google Container Registry or Artifact Registry. On the expanded support for workloads side, this has actually been a pretty exciting few months. We launched the ability to run multiple containers in a Cloud Run instance, otherwise known as sidecars, to public preview a couple of weeks ago. This is really exciting. We also GA'd Cloud Run jobs and CPU boost. On the security side, we now have GA support for the identity-aware proxy. And on networking, we've got a host of expanded support for, various Google load balancer types, as well as a pretty exciting thing that actually didn't make the slide, but we have a preview launch of a direct VPC connection outbound from a Cloud Run service, so no longer having to spin up a VPC connector. That capability is now in preview. So now it's enough of me talking about Cloud Run. I'd love to hand it over to Dmitry here to keep telling more about deep dive on Firebase.
Thank you, Justin. Enough talking. Now Dmitry will continue the talking. So glad to be here. Really wonderful to see you all. Thank you for coming to our session. I work a lot with Justin. It's fun to do a talk with him. Firebase and Google Cloud are very connected organizations. And I'm just curious. I'm going to ask for some raise of hands because I want to test a few things. One of them is, how many folks here actually use Firebase in something work-related? All right. That's encouraging. Thank you. Thank you for being our customers. Who here thinks that Firebase and Google Cloud are kind of completely two separate products? I just hear this a lot from customers. Okay, one brave, couple of brave hands. Yeah, be brave. It's okay. Tell us we have some messaging problems. In terms of Firebase hosting specifically, does anybody here use Firebase hosting in their applications? Okay, awesome. Well, thank you for entertaining me. So we, just to kind of level set, we are definitely a separate kind of team inside of Google, Firebase that is, And we are a team that has a lot of products. And I'm going to give you folks a little bit of a primer because there's a lot of folks in this room that don't use Firebase, and you probably need a little bit of an education of what we're even showing you. I mean, it's cool that we have this integration, but can you depend on it? Can you use it? I'm going to try to answer some of those questions. And I'll, along the way, just show you just how much connection there is between the parts of Firebase that I work on and Google Cloud. So with that, let's describe Firebase. So Firebase is an app platform. The way that I think about it is Google Cloud is a lot of technology that has to do whatever the user needs. It's very customizable, very flexible. Sometimes we call it primitives in certain situations. But basically, Google Cloud is this massive set of capabilities. And Firebase is a very opinionated subset of that capability. And we are a very app-centric team. We think about how do we enable you folks to build mobile apps, web applications, and how do we make that as easy as possible. So that's kind of our mission. If we're failing it, let me know. But that's the goal. And we focus a lot on the pillars of web, mobile, and games. Those are the three game developers. Those are the three categories we have SDKs in and actual real capabilities. So really, what is Firebase, kind of as you think about it? So Firebase is a set of SDKs and capabilities and sometimes services that we write in order to make all of this possible. So we try to make this as easy for you, and therefore that's a lot of times the SDK that you're actually interacting with, or the CLI, or the service that sort of like takes complexity and makes it simpler for you to use as an end user. So that's kind of how we think about trying to add value. And quite a few companies use us. There's many more. But basically, it's names you might have heard of. Firebase is around everywhere. And it's always fun just to run into customers like many of you here in the audience. So another thing that is the reality of our product is we have a lot of products. So Firebase is a platform. Inside of our platform, we have capabilities that span kind of three major areas. The way we think about it is there's an area where it's about building, so that kind of left side of it. So the building is the closest to Google Cloud. These are the capabilities that we've created that often are Google Cloud services that we make available to you as an app developer in an integrated way that Google Cloud by itself just doesn't make it easy to do. And then we have the middle column, which is improve up quality. We have very famous product Crashalytics. We have Test Lab, things that make building, especially mobile applications, much easier. And then finally, we have in-app messaging, remote config, again, products that make the world go round. Cloud messaging is very, very pervasive out there. So with all these products together, that's Firebase. And here's where some of the misconceptions come in, that Firebase is just for mobile applications. That's just not true. We have had SDKs for web developers for the longest time. It's one of the most important audiences. I spend all day long trying to make web developers happy. Another misconception is that Firebase and Firestore are the same thing. I often get people coming up to me and they go, I use Firebase. And I'm like, great, which product? And they look at me like, what? I mean, the database, obviously. I'm like, no, we have a few more. And many people use them. So Firestore is a subset of what we offer. So we have two document databases. We have security. We have lots of capabilities. And today, I'm going to talk to you a bit about that left side because that's kind of where I work. So this slide is something I created just to kind of like put a nail in it to say, look, these are the kind of things that I think about. This is what I worry about. These are the things I want to make easy for you as developers to do. So I spend a lot of my time making sure a web developer, a mobile developer has storage and compute and databases and security. And we have a whole team of people that Firebase just focuses on this. If you come over and ask me a question about Crashalytics, I will not be able to help you. But if you ask me about any of these things, there's a good chance I can assist you on. So that's kind of where we're going to spend our time. So now that we understand, actually I'm going to say one more thing about Firebase. So we, because this is an enterprise conference, I wouldn't go into detail if this wasn't, but terms of service. So I like to be very transparent. We have some products like hosting that is not on Google Cloud terms of service. You have to sign the Firebase terms of service. Just be aware of that. Some organizations need you to go through processes in order to do that. So really investigate each product you want to use from us. Make sure that it's on the right terms. We have products like, Cloud Functions, which in production is Cloud Functions. So that's on the right terms of service right away, but just be cognizant of that. I don't want you to get in trouble for using one of our cool products. And this is an area actually we're investing a lot in. Like we really want to make this to be easier for you to understand as a developer. You shouldn't have to worry about this as much. And we I acknowledge it, we'll make it better. But other than that, these are products that are really cloud aligned. So let's go in and talk about Firebase hosting. So Firebase hosting is all about these kind of major pillar areas. So the first one is easy deployment, easy development in general. Like you'll see my demos aren't very long. I kind of was laughing with Justin. I'm going to hit one CLI command and be like, okay, I'm kind of done. Let's go look at the console, because that's really all it takes to get things deployed. We've already talked a little bit of a global CDN. We do have a global CDN. We manage it for you. We deploy your static site all over the world, and it's nice and easy. We give you HTTPS and certificates out of the box. You don't have to manage it. We'll configure it for you. And of course, your static website needs an API. And that might not come from Google Cloud Platform, but you might need to host something on Google Cloud that provides you backend capabilities. Cloud Run, Cloud Functions does that. But customers can also use Firestore right from their mobile or web app directly. So there's even more available to you, but today, it's a short session. I can't show you everything. So we'll talk a lot about Cloud Run, because this is the Cloud Run talk. And Justin was like, you better talk about Cloud Run. I'm kidding. He was much nicer than that. And finally, caching. We talked about caching. So you saw how cool it is to just take advantage of the CDN and its capability. So that's really the highlights of Firebase hosting. If you remember these things, you kind of understand a big part of what we do. This globally available static hosting service all around the world. That's just a pretty picture. And then finally, this is where we're going to spend our time. So you, as a developer, again, have two options. If you have more options, but canonically speaking, most people will choose either Cloud Run for their backend, or they'll choose functions for their backend. There's pros and cons. There's videos for that. I'm not gonna tell you which one to use, but there's definitely reasons. Today we'll just do a little Cloud Run demo just to do something. But both work equally well, and I'll show you how easy it is to kind of mix your static content and your API paths together to make all that happen. And another thing, again, if you're not a Firebase developer, you'd be like, well, how do I use Firebase? Is it gcloud? No, it's its own. We have our own console. We have our own tools, and Firebase deploy is kind of the message we always send to customers. Like, yeah, Firebase deploy, and this thing will actually go out, and I'll show you how that works. Assuming my machine has Wi-Fi. That's been fun. All right, so let's enough talking and talk about Firebase hosting and Cloud Run from a demo perspective. So just give me a second. I have to pull my machine up here, make sure that it's awake and functional. Cue the music, maestro. All right. I think next year I'm upgrading to the bigger podium. This is going to be just a second here. I know you're all rooting for me to get my HDMI cable into this machine. All right. Okay, so with that, we see my machine. Excellent. All right, so let's talk about what I'm going to be demoing here. I'm going to make this a bit bigger, so hopefully you all can see. So here's my very simple demo. It's not nearly as fancy as a blog or anything like that. These are very, you'll see a product manager made this website, not a designer and an engineer. So here's some things I want to show right off the bat. Right here, I'm going to have a website. This is an Angular site. It has like one page of content. Again, nothing, I'm not teaching you Angular today. You could choose React, you could choose whatever. It's a static hosting service. You can use Flutter Web. Like you can choose your front end of choice and get it out there and deploy it. So that's just my choice today. And in there, I also have a server, and my server is very complicated. It's Go. We decided to stick to the theme of Go. Why not? We can have chosen .NET. We could have chosen, other things, Node.js, obviously, etc. But we chose Go, and this thing will return hello world. So that's all there is to it. So just architecturally speaking, there's going to be a static site. So instead of like going from like how Justin positioned it, right? He went from, I have Cloud Run. I'm going to host my thing in Cloud Run. Cloud Run is where my website is served from. I'm going to add a custom domain and CDN through Firebase. So he went kind of right to left. I'm going left to right. I'm saying I'm going to deploy a static website. And that static website will talk to an API, and that API is hosted inside of Cloud Run. It could have been functions. It could have been some third-party API endpoint. It doesn't matter. So that's where that is. And we're going to go ahead and just kick that off. So first of all, I would need to deploy my Cloud Run service. So this is still gcloud. So I have gcloud tooling installed. I'm just going to hit enter. looking at my Wi-Fi connection. It's going to go do its thing. It's exactly what you can do, so I'm not going to bore you. I'm going to switch to another terminal, and I'm going to say, all right, let's Firebase deploy. So what Firebase deploy is doing, if I click in the right place, that really helps. So Firebase deploy is going to look at my subfolders, and it's going to figure out that I have the right stuff there, and they need to go build it. I also have a config file that kind of gives Firebase deploy, some configuration that it needs, and it's going to go and deploy 3 things. It's going to also deploy a function. We'll come back to that function in a bit, but this is going to get everything else kind of in place and going. So let's go take a look at what. Oh my God, I got this error once today, which something with my environment. So there it is. There's my error. There's my fame to failure today. At least this is not a keynote, but luckily all this is already deployed, so we will be fine to keep going. So here's my beautiful website. Really, really nice. I know, I'm hearing the applause. And it has a button. If you click the button, it talks to an API. The API returns hello world. And then it has a field, and if I put into this field an email, so there's an email, you hit subscribe, it's going to send that to a Firestore database. So you just saw 2 different things. You saw an Angular static website that is running completely in the browser. When they hit the button, talk to an API, that API was that Go server, right? It was deployed to Cloud Run from source. I never had to build a container. It's so nice and magical. And then the subscribe button is actually using the SDK that we build for Firestore, the document database we talked about earlier. And again, right from the client, it's talking to that data store and submitting an email address. Now, in a real-world app, we'd have authentication and all of that. Like, this is all very simple. Don't do this. Obviously, we don't want the whole world being able to write to my Firestore database. I will delete it after this talk. But in the real world, you can totally hook this up, and it's real, and it works. And let's go take a look at what this looks like in a Firebase console. So in the Firebase console, I've created a project, same concept as Google Cloud, and they're linked. So in this case, I have a project called Dmitry Cloud Next 01. And in here, I've been deploying my website. So I clicked on this hosting button, and because I deployed something, I can see, and you're going to see not my name in there. That's because we have a system to get test account, and it auto-generates a name. I hope that's not a real person, but it gave me a name, and I'm using it. So this person and this fake Gmail account that it created for me is able to deploy to my project because I gave this person rights. And these are all the times I've deployed. You can see the different revisions. I can roll back to a revision, delete a revision, and then I get the same kind of friendly URLs that I just showed you a second ago. There it is. And all of this is something that Firebase created as a construct. Now, if I go back to Cloud Run, this is my Go, that Go script basically got deployed from source. Here it is. It's seeing a little bit of traffic. I'm not as popular as Justin's website was. But this is just Cloud Run, right? So everything you know about Cloud Run applies here, totally integrated between us and Firebase. The only thing to consider is like an application architecture kind of thing is obviously we're globally distributed CDN when your static content goes up to our website. And we have a free tier. You can go try it out, and it's wonderful. But your backend is in a specific region. So you just have to keep in mind that, well, your customers will be served globally unless you put something in front of that API backend that also figures out how to route people to the best backend endpoint. You're not going to get that magical performance unless you also cache that output in the CDN the way Justin did, and then you will. So you still have to be engineers. You're still going to have to figure out some stuff, but we try to make it as much of it as possible easy. We listen to your feedback. These products are all actively being worked on. We're doing some awesome stuff. I wish I could show you more, but I can't today. This is all I can do. So with that, just to point out that everything is exactly how you expected. You've got everything running. So we're going to go back to the slides, please. All right, awesome. The clicker is now clicking other stuff. How do I do this? Help. This is where you need an expert because I clicked the wrong thing. I don't know how that happened. Okay, thank you so much. What would we do without other people in this world? We'd be stuck on that previous slide, and I'd have to talk to you about it. All right, so recapping hosting, global reach, a lot of developer productivity. We find people are very productive working with our stuff. We teach it in schools. Kids learn about it like it's something anyone can pick up and go deploy a static site, and has a great free tier. The dynamic backend, totally flexible with the Google Cloud capability. Anything that is on run or functions, we can route to it just by. And by the way, that routing, I'll show it in a second when I go back to my demo machine. But it is like one line. Like I just say this service in this region /API and magic. There you go. We also have been, we obviously pay attention to where the community is going. Lots of people are building Next.js applications. Angular is working on Angular Universal, which is another similar kind of things that does server-side rendering, that needs compute in the back end. So we have an experiment already up since Google I/O that you can go ahead and try, and you can deploy a Next.js app. We combine functions and static hosting together. We merge it, we do all the configuration for you, and we deploy it up to our two products together, and that's how you can have server-side rendering capability. So we're definitely paying attention. Again, we'll work on all of this. Obviously, we want you folks to have a powerful product that meets your needs. But today, this is just an experiment, just calling it out because I don't have time to demo that. I'd love to show everything today. So we're going to go ahead and talk about Cloud Functions for a second. So Cloud Functions is let's just take a step back for a second before I even go to a slide. We as Firebase have a functions product. That functions product is actually Google Cloud Functions. The reason why our product is called Cloud Functions for Firebase is because we add a bunch of magic sauce to do certain things that the more generic functions product just doesn't do and doesn't care to do because it doesn't have the Firebase ecosystem around it. So because we have a Firebase ecosystem, we have certain events which are unique, and functions is event-driven architecture. We have certain events in Firebase, so we need to inject those properly. We also have the ability to make kind of different default decisions because we build this for app developers. We don't build this for the generic audience of somebody who has to themselves figure out how much concurrency to configure or whatever. So we basically created a capability on top of it, an SDK on top of Google Cloud Functions, and that SDK, if I click in the right direction, can do quite a few things. Authentication, Firestore, just triggers off tons of events, both inside of Firebase and outside of Firebase. You can use Node and Python as of earlier this year. We added Python preview, so we support 2 programming languages you can build in, because that's what our SDK support. If you use functions, you have more programming languages, but you lose some of this integration capability that we will give you. And we, again, just to kind of recap, we are basically, when you talk about second-gen functions, we're in good company, right? We take advantage of Cloud Run. We take advantage of Cloud Functions behind the scenes. We actually inherit a lot of the capabilities from these 2 products up to our product. And all of this allows you to get up and running really quickly. So with that, I'm going to go ahead back to my machine. And let's switch over to the demo, please. I'll try not to mess up the slides. OK. All right, let's go back to this window for a second, because like I said, I forgot to show something that I wanted to show. So if I collapse everything back down, there's a Firebase JSON file. And in my demo previously, where I had an API endpoint, the one that says hello world, this is literally all I had to do to configure that. We will do all the hard stuff for you. You just do that and you get an API endpoint on Cloud Run that you can use. So kind of magical, but it is kind of region specific is the only thing that I want you all to be aware of. All right, so with that, I'm going to go ahead and show you one last thing. We have a function here. So this function got deployed. It's a second-gen function. And again, it doesn't matter what the function does at this point. I'm just going to go ahead and show you something that, again, some people just don't realize. The thing is, this function is a second-gen Google Cloud function. So I'm not even in the Firebase console. It's a Firebase thing. I deployed it with Firebase. It has Firebase metadata around it, all of that stuff, but it's just a function that is running in Google Cloud. So when people ask me, can I depend on Firebase functions? I'm like, well, if you depend on Google Cloud, yes. I mean, it's the same infrastructure. We don't build or maintain the infrastructure. We have a million friends all over the world building this stuff for us, and we get to give you an amazing developer experience. And they have a great UI that even we don't have in our console that you can take advantage of because it's 2 products that are deeply integrated. And then finally, if you need a solution sometimes, yes, you can build your own function, you can deploy something in Cloud Run, but I'm going to show you kind of one more bonus thing. It's a brand new product we're building called Firebase Extensions Hub. Firebase Extension Hubs is all open source, pre-made functions, some by Firebase, some by third parties, and anyone can publish one if you pass our validation process to this marketplace. And we have this cool website which allows you to find all sorts of pre-made capabilities. So in this case, if I want to, let's say, send email, I can go over here and say trigger email from Firestore because that's what I want to do. And if I come in here and I click that install button, again, time is kind of running out, but it would basically into my infrastructure, into my free tier, into my credit card enabled tier, depending on how much you use this function. Like in your compute capability, you can install a function that either we made, in this case we did make it, we're the publisher for this one, or somebody else made, and it's all open source, so again, you'll never have anything deployed that you can't see or fork. It all has to be open source under open license. And we've made a bunch of things just easier for you. We have stuff to integrate with Palm, with email, BigQuery, and all these extensions. You go here, you hit install, and then you manage them on the Firebase console or CLI. And if I had time, I would show you the end-to-end demo where I can spam myself emails. I installed this extension, but I didn't configure a good SMTP server, so it won't work. But if I did, it would work because people use it in production. So we have these great capabilities that we're trying to, again, make your lives a little bit easier, make you a little bit more productive. And with that, I will show you that the function that we deploy through the extension is, once again, it's in the Google Cloud Console because it's just a function. So we at Firebase, while we create magic, none of this magic is hidden from you or built in some other cloud or has some other company who you have to depend on. As long as you use our extensions, as long as you use our functions, etc., we're a team that tries to be there for you. We can go back to the slides. Boy, we're hitting time. And thank you all again for being here with us. All right, recap. So functions, opinionated defaults. We default for concurrency because that's what a lot of web developers need. As just one example, it's integrated with the Firebase ecosystem and it's powered by the Google Cloud Platform. And boy, I wish everybody knew that because some people just still argue with me. I'm like, I'm the product guy. It's my thing. I know for sure. And these products are being worked on. So functions, we've just GA'd second gen. In following Google Cloud GAing it a little bit earlier than us. We have Python support in beta. On hosting, we have these experiments around these modern applications. We are about to release some custom domain improvements in the console. So we're constantly trying to make these products better. Extensions constantly gets new extensions published and we're tuning. It's a beta product, so we're tuning the UI. But the cool thing is that at the end of the day, extensions, even though the kind of the shell is beta, the thing it deploys is just code and the production functions environment. So as long as you're comfortable with that end result, you're kind of in good hands. And again, nothing is behind the firewall. Thank you all so much. Thank you all.
Thanks, everybody.